So this week here on the channel, we've talked about Alabama losing two scholarship players to the transfer portal, center James Brockermeyer and defensive lineman Curtis Perry. But today, we need to talk about Kalen DeBoer and the Crimson Tide hosting a player via the transfer portal, this time defensive back from Arizona State, Ed Woods, and why this is intriguing. But before we can jump into this, y'all know the drill. I have got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes, N for no. Are you hoping that Ed Woods commits to the Crimson Tide? And let me know what you're thinking. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it, and if you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and comment down below. But having said all that, let's jump right into this. And as I alluded to in the intro, Ed Woods is an experienced defensive back transferring from Arizona State. And one of the things we've talked about in relation to Ed Woods is whenever you turn on the film, there's a few things you're going to notice. In fact, if you want to go back and watch some of his games, I would highly recommend Arizona State versus Washington, because Arizona State had a really solid plan and gave Washington some fits. But specifically, Ed Woods was great in that game. I think it needs to be said that he only played one half of that game, being held out the first half due to a targeting call the week before, but in that second half, he instantly made his presence known. His first series, he accounted for a tackle, and then on a few plays later, got a strip tackle. He was making plays everywhere, and even on the plays where he wasn't actually making physical tackles, he was doing things that stood out to me. One such play, they ran a switch route at he and the cornerback to his inside, and they communicated and picked it up perfectly. And that's what you want to see out of an experienced defensive back. Someone that has eye discipline. Someone that's going to be able to understand, okay, I've seen this before, I've been here before, this is what we need to do, and be able to effectively communicate that with his teammate, which is exactly what he did on a few occasions. The other thing I like about Woods is his versatility, where you can slot him at several different positions in the secondary. However, the majority of his 2023 experience was at outside cornerback, something Alabama is looking at. And we talk about this all the time whenever we talk about the defensive backs currently at Alabama. The question is not talent, furthest thing from. Alabama was very lucky, and as I have deemed it, Nick Saban's parting gift, 3 5-star defensive backs, and a bevy of defensive backs outside of that are going to be real high-ceiling players that Alabama fans everywhere are so excited about. We're talking Peyton Woodyard, we're talking Dre Kirkpatrick Jr., we're talking Red Morgan, all guys in that class just this past year that are going to make an impact. But the one thing you just don't have a lot of in that secondary is experience. And if you can get a guy that can contribute playing time and use his experience to not only help out the defense, but help these young guys continue to develop, that's really positive. I know I say this all the time, but I think it deserves to be said. There's a reason why, when you're in college, your tutors most of the time aren't professors. They're your peers, because it's easier to digest that information. Well, the same argument can be made in this circumstance, where if you're a young defensive back, it's great having Mo Linguist coach you up. It's great having Kane Womack call the defense. But at the same time, it's awesome having a Malachi Moore back there, being able to use his experience to say, hey, this is why we do this. This is why we do this. This is why this happened. Being able to compound that with more guys that have experience and can play, well, I think that's one of the beautiful things about the transfer portal. It's part of the reason why I always say you use the transfer portal as a band-aid. If you have a need, that's where you can look to the transfer portal, because you can get some really interesting players via the transfer portal, players that have experience, and that experience can be overwhelmingly positive. And this is an area where Kalen DeBoer has been forthright in saying, hey, we want to add in some depth. We know we have talent at the cornerback position. We just don't have the experience, and we would really like to use the transfer portal to supplement some experience and get some more depth in the defensive backfield. So we know that a move will be made there. The question is who? Well, that's why I'm so excited to see what happens with Ed Woods, because he is a productive defensive back, and we talked about his eye discipline. The one thing we didn't get to talk about is that he treats everything like a nail and that he's a hammer. He comes down with violent intent to lay tackles, and for me, you guys know I'm a fan of that. He is not shying away from contact. He welcomes it, And I do think that's something I love, especially whenever you're talking about the SEC. When these defensive backs, they're going to be asked to come up and make tackles. He has no problem doing so, something that should excite all Alabama fans. Now, while this is the defensive back that is scheduling a visit to the Crimson Tide, remember, the transfer portal is still open, and all you have to do is have your papers entered by the 30th. And one thing I would point out, just because the 30th may come and go, don't be surprised if you still see some names popping up in the transfer portal, because the paperwork can take a few days to process. And you don't have to commit within the transfer portal window, just enter. So there are a lot of names in the transfer portal. There's a lot of players in the transfer portal right now. You don't have to commit by the 30th, just have your paperwork beginning to be processed by the 30th, and then you can commit at any time. There are very talented defensive backs out there that I'm wondering whether or not Alabama will look at. One such name that I haven't heard anything in relation to Alabama, but I'm certainly curious, is Anthony Johnson Jr. This was a guy that was one of the highest graded cornerbacks in the nation. In fact, he had a grade of above a 90, one of only a handful of defensive backs to do that in terms of his coverage grade. When you turn on his film, he is productive. He has interceptions. He's got pass deflections. He's a really good player, and I'd be really curious to see whether or not Alabama would reach out to him, but we're going to have to wait and see on that. Y'all already know. I can't wait to hear from all of you. Hop down to the comments. Let me know what you think about Ed Woods, someone who this past year had 27 solo tackles, 33 total, 2 forced fumbles, 1 interception, and 4 passes deflected. So like I said, he was a really productive player, and I would certainly recommend checking out that second half versus Washington, because he made his presence felt, and he made his presence felt early. But I'm also curious to see what other work Alabama will do with defensive backs in the transfer portal. I haven't made it a secret. I'd really like for them to push for Anthony Johnson Jr., but that's something we're going to have to watch for. Hop down to the comments. Let me know what you're thinking. That's it. See ya.